Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the KB Ear Neon. So the Neon is almost the successor to the KB Ear F1. For those of you who remember, this was one of KB Ear's initial models as a young upstart company. It is a cool, squarish, acrylic, single BA, MMCX, and this one happens to be a Belsing version. But very cool original set, and I think the Neon was meant to be almost a refresh of that initial model, but updated with a nicer driver, but along the same lines of bullet style, maybe a better fit, and a upgraded Knowles driver, single BA driver. So this is what it looks like up close. Again, it is a resin-filled, solid. You can see the KB Ear logo on it, and inside is actually a Knowles. You can almost read it. 26689 or 29689, one of the two. Almost, yeah, there it is, 29869. So quite nice. This is not the stock cable. This is actually a KB Ear expansion 24 core cable. The Neon prefers a little more volume, a little more power, and happen to use a 2.5 millimeter balanced output, which gives me a little more headroom there. Although the stock cable is quite nice, it is SPC as well, and you get angled QDC connectors on that, so quite nice. The packaging itself, again, a nice upgrade from their standard budget set, and it includes a KB Ear case, which is very nice. So I do want to thank the Friendly Audio Store and Keep Hi-Fi on AliExpress for sending this one out to me. If you look on their store today, it's $49.99. So compared to an Etymotic, it's a more affordable single BA in that style, and I think that confused lots of folks originally, because it was big question was whether it was going to outperform an Etymotic or be a more affordable alternative for many parts of the world who can't get their hands on an Etymotic at anywhere near that price. So as we kind of deep dive into it, we'll kind of cover that topic as well. But so let's begin with the fit and the tips. And it was the part that I struggled with the most, and I still see people talking about it. So in my mind, they're using an Etymotic Knowles driver. They tuned it in a similar style. It's in this bullet style shell. So all the signs kind of point to maybe it should fit like an Etymotic with a very deep fit. And for me, that deep fit is the best bass, the smaller stage, but the mids and the vocals are much closer, but it requires very small tips. And these are final E tips, but this is the small one, so you can almost see that if it focuses. Quite a small tip, just a bit wider than the shell itself. And that gives me a deep fit, much like a final E5. I have a 500. But you're going to push that pretty much all the way into your ear as far as you can. And that gives me the best bass, as I said, and the smaller stage, but the mids are much closer to what you get in if you're just going to tip roll it, use your favorite tips and push them into your ear. It's going to sound very wide. The vocals are going to be a bit distant. You're not going to get as much bass either. So push them in farther. So again, I couldn't get away from pushing them in farther. Ends up being a better sound for me, and I know that's not going to be the same thing for everyone, but for me that's what it was. And I will tell you that this paper is kind of full of things to try if you get your hands on a Neon and it doesn't sound quite right. Pushing them in further into your ear is definitely at the top of the list. So is it easy to drive? Yes, it is, but it sounds much better at higher volumes and a bit more power. You're definitely going to feel more detail, a little more clarity, more bass, and more treble. And it's not to say you can't really drive it with a phone at all. It's fine with a phone. But when you switch to, especially when you up the volume and the treble becomes more present and the bass tightens up with a little more power, it sounds much better. So I'm not going to say it's hard to drive, but it definitely prefers more volume and a bit more power. So another thing to try if you're not really into that or you have only a phone, Larry Fulton was generous to publish some PEQ settings, and you can kind of see the 2 points that he addressed to get you kind of closer to that edemotic style tuning. I mean, so bump the bass a little bit. Nothing wrong with bumping the bass. A good 6 decibels. That's always a good thing. So the second one, this 25 hertz, is really addressing that edemotic style rise into the lower treble. If you have an edemotic, you know that that's a pretty steep rise, and it's the part that annoys people about edemotics as well. But I think the Neon went a little polite on that, so he bumps that one by 3 decibels. And I will say that that's a fine thing to do at lower listening volumes. The higher you get, this will become a bit shouty. And at some point, my volume was high enough that I didn't feel that one was all that required. But definitely something to try, especially if you're at a lower volume listener. So the sound. So this is the graph from the KB Ear listing or the Neon listing on the KB Ear official store. So, it's pretty much edemotic style, neutral, bright. It's very flat up until the rise, and then it does the original slope. So, looks quite good. And I will say it's a really nice sound, and neutral, bright, reference style, but it's more relaxed. I have an ER4 XR, which has a real intensity, especially after that rise. That treble hits you quite hard, and some people call that shouty. So this one is definitely more relaxed and maybe a bit too relaxed, so use that PEQ setting. It's somewhere in between the two. It's definitely not as detailed and as intense as an ER4 XR, but it's along those same lines. So is it an affordable edemotic? In my opinion, the way the sound varies with the fit and the tips makes it a problem because not everyone is going to experience that. And just reading reviews on Headfi or other forums, you can see people are saying, yeah, the mids are kind of closed down. Maybe they're open. After I changed the tips, they did this. I had to do, these different tips, and it sounded much better. So, yeah, it's kind of your mileage is going to vary on how close it is to an edemotic. It's going to depend on how much time you spend trying to get that fit right. And I saw Larry Fulton again was continuing on with a foam mod, which is he posted a graph that closed the gap to a standard diffuse field neutral target. So he is kind of still actively working on it. So I tend to agree with these. It's sort of a work in progress. If you think you're going to open the box and pop them in your ears and everything is going to sound perfect, probably not the case. You're going to have to tip roll at a minimum. So do take that into consideration if you are thinking about the Neon. So bass-wise, it is still BA bass. It is still a single BA. There is no dedicated low-end BA for the bass. So everything that goes along with those expectations are going to be what you find in it. It's not a DD replacement style BA bass. It tends to be lighter. It's on the swifter, faster side, which is kind of nice. But there really isn't a whole lot of sub bass to it, and I tend to avoid going down into music that hits the sub bass too much. Definitely not going to mistake it for a DD, but when you listen to music and you push these things into your ear quite far, there definitely is an adequate bass level, and it's good quality. I mean, there's nice texture there. It's everything that people like about BA bass is what you find in this one. It's not too light. It's not too fast. There's enough decay there to enjoy the bass. It sticks around long enough to fully support the mids and the treble, and generally a nice track like that. So, but do have BA bass expectations. And the bass is going to be a supporting player. It's not really the highlight of this set. And do avoid deep sub-bass tracks. I would say that's a generally good statement on this guy. But it doesn't mean the bass is super light. So Tools, Chocolate Chip Trip, if you jump to that 230 version with that 230 time, when the drums really kick in, it actually sounds really good for a 1BA. The drums sound just as deep as you're expecting them to. Do you get that rumble? No, but as far as the actual drum sound, pretty dead on. It's actually pretty good. But I think drums actually do sound better than electronic music. If you're into electronic dance music, some of that electronic low frequency sounds not as good on the Neon. And as I said, better on a much deeper fit, better bass response. So the mids is where this thing is, it's very much going to be dependent on your fit and what you do to either push it in your ear, or I don't even know what to do other than you can change the tips. I tried different tips that were wider, closed. Nothing really affects it as much as pushing it into your ear or finding tips that will allow you to push it slightly more into your ear. But the mids can go from quite good, approaching that edemotic style mids, or it could be really crushed. And I think part of it, and I think Larry Fulton tried to explain this, that the soundstage is super wide, but in having such a wide stage, the vocals end up being pushed back to the back of the stage, and I would call them sounding crushed, but they almost sound recessed or small. You don't get all that detail that you should, and that's why I said the deeper fit brings the mids and the vocals closer to you. So I'd like to say that the mids are really awesome, but they're only as good as the fit you get and the tips that work in your ear. So even with me, so REM's Drive sounds really, really good. It sounds just like it should. Michael Stipe is kind of right there, and the guitars are there. Everything is there, and not too recessed at all. It sounds quite good. But then you listen to Kanye West's Power, and it sounds like he's in a tunnel. Everything is just straight back, far. Yeah, that one doesn't sound all that good. So your mids are going to range from distant, lacking detail, or they're going to sound intimate and detailed based on your tips and your fit. And I know that's a wishy-washy way to describe the mids. They're either really good or bad, but I don't know what else to say about it. That's kind of the way it's going to work with this one. If you get bad mids, you're going to have to change your tips or push them in. You're going to have to do something. So to push back and recessed, push them into your ear. That'll narrow the stage a little bit, but your vocals and your mids will actually come a little closer. Not enough detailed, or it sounds a little muffled, I would turn it up or use that EQ setting. Upper mids are more polite than the ER4 XR, but not too much. So I think they're quite a bit under the ER4 XR. So PEQ that if you want that. If you want a little more bite to your upper mids, a little sharper, but generally out of the box, not shouty or sibilant at all. So the treble, it is a Knowles 29689, so it's not metallic. It's not like your KZ, what is it, 395. It's not that budget treble. Not shouty, but metallic and screechy almost. It's not that. It's a high quality driver. There's no doubt about that. But for me, it's tuned a little bit too polite. Perhaps this has worked a lot better for people who are edemotic sensitive. I like the edemotic, but there's tons of people who maybe don't like it. It's a bit too sharp for them. And this one is more in line for those folks who are a little more sensitive to those lower treble sounds. So for me, I was okay with a general little treble boost, a whole upper range, little boost, just to, especially at lower volumes, to give you just a little more detail, a little more presence in your treble. But, if you increase the volume, you sort of get the same effect. And I would say it doesn't have the ER4 XR extension or the intensity. So good and bad on that side. So stage, again, is very much like the mids. It's very dependent on your fit and your tips. It either goes from super wide to almost a bit too narrow. And for me, with a deeper fit, I don't really think it's not too narrow for me. It's not like some stages do like a full 180 degrees, and this is like one where you get you know, maybe that like 145 degrees, everything is in view, is how some people euphemistically say it. Not too wide, but everything, it's almost like you're viewing the stage from a couple rows back, so everyone is in view, and all the instruments are sort of in the same space, which is a sort of a benefit for some people. So yeah, again, it's like the mids. It'll depend on how far you push it in and what your tips, but definitely that is the one thing to pay attention to when you're tip rolling or trying to get the fit right, is to pay attention to how wide the sound is. So that's about it. That was a interesting view of the KB Ear Neon, and there's a good chance I'll continue playing with this one, and I may try Larry Fulton's foam mod. I think that sounded like a pretty good idea, or at least it was along the lines of something that was worth trying, since I already have it. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.